Imagine you're trapped inside a city, the exits sealed, bombs raining, food vanishing, and someone shows up with a peace plan that demands you disarm and give up your territory. Sound fair? Welcome to Gaza in 2025. That's not a movie trailer. That's today's headline. Israel is tightening the siege around Gaza City, while behind the scenes, Hamas is weighing a 20-point Trump peace proposal that might reshape the war or deepen it. Let's break this down, deep, bold, and unfiltered. Stay with me. This is where the lines between diplomacy and desperation blur. Tonight we turn to Gaza, where Israel has intensified its military siege on Gaza City, shutting down escape routes, tightening supply chains, and increasing bombardments, while at the very same moment, Hamas faces enormous pressure to respond to a controversial peace framework put forward by former U.S. President Donald Trump. This plan, a 20-point proposal, has been conditionally accepted by Israel, but not yet embraced or rejected by Hamas. The result is a tense and dangerous crossroads. On the ground, families face displacement, shortages, and fear. Politically, leaders weigh whether signing on to the Trump plan means surrendering core demands or securing survival. Tonight, we break down this crisis into 8 clear realities: the siege, the plan itself, Hamas's dilemma, Israel's strategy, the humanitarian costs, the regional response, the tipping points of acceptance versus rejection, and finally, the long-term implications for Gaza and the wider conflict. Each fact is critical to understanding how this moment could redefine not just Gaza, but Middle Eastern geopolitics. Let's get into it. When Israel says it has tightened the siege of Gaza City, the phrase is loaded with both military and political weight. In practice, it means the encirclement of a city of more than 500,000 people, where exits are sealed off and entry is virtually impossible. According to reports from the ground, Israeli forces have blocked northern travel corridors, restricted east-west crossings, and left only a south route available, one already under bombardment and highly dangerous to use. Israeli spokespeople describe this encirclement as a necessary step to cut Hamas's command structure from supply lines, but residents and aid workers emphasize that the effect is immediate on civilians: shortages of food, fuel, and clean water, compounded by heavy artillery and airstrikes. The most alarming detail comes from Israeli officials themselves. Defense Minister Israel Katz warned that anyone remaining in Gaza City past evacuation deadlines may be treated as militants or militant supporters. In other words, the legal distinction between civilians and combatants is blurred. This is not just a military tactic, it is psychological warfare aimed at forcing mass displacement. But while bombs fall, a different kind of pressure is mounting on paper, one involving 20 points, U.S. diplomacy, and a peace plan built for headlines. Donald Trump's peace plan for Gaza arrived as a 20-point framework, immediately accepted, at least in principle, by Israel. The plan requires Hamas to disarm fully, hand over all hostages within 72 hours, and relinquish governing authority in Gaza. In exchange, Israel would suspend active combat operations and begin a phased, conditional withdrawal of its ground troops. On the surface, the deal reads as a pathway to ceasefire, but critics argue the imbalance is stark. Hamas would give up its primary means of leverage, its arsenal and hostages, without guaranteed concessions on core political goals. Nowhere does the plan clearly commit to Palestinian statehood, sovereignty, or long-term freedom of movement. Instead, the focus rests on security guarantees for Israel and a restructuring of Gaza's internal administration. Supporters, particularly in Washington and Tel Aviv, promote the framework as realistic and achievable. Detractors call it surrender by another name, a deal designed to end resistance but not occupation. For Hamas, the document represents not an offer of peace, but an ultimatum. And that is where the dilemma lies. Accepting the plan looks like capitulation, but rejecting it risks devastation. Inside Hamas, the debate is raging.
Hamas is trapped between 2 impossible choices. Accept the plan, and it risks political suicide, losing its weapons, its governing authority, and the symbolic leadership of Palestinian resistance. Reject it, and Israel gains diplomatic cover to escalate its siege with global backing. According to sources quoted to Reuters, Hamas leaders have been meeting for days, balancing input from regional allies. One senior official summarized the situation bluntly: accepting is a disaster, rejecting is another. These are only bitter options. Internally, divisions are visible. Some commanders favor rejecting the plan outright, insisting it offers nothing tangible to Palestinians. Others suggest that even an imperfect ceasefire could buy time, save lives, and allow for future negotiations. External actors, particularly Qatar and Egypt, are urging Hamas to at least engage diplomatically. The real issue, however, is survival. With Gaza encircled and civilians suffering, Hamas risks being blamed by its own people if it rejects a peace initiative, no matter how flawed. Yet if it accepts, it hands Israel and Trump a narrative victory. While Hamas debates in backrooms, Israel's forces aren't waiting. They're tightening the siege with bombs, blockades, and political leverage. Israel's military strategy blends battlefield tactics with political maneuvering. On the ground, the siege intensifies. Reports confirm artillery barrages, continued airstrikes, and announcements that Gaza City residents must evacuate or be considered combatants. On the diplomatic stage, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu emphasizes conditional acceptance of the Trump plan, stressing that any ceasefire must preserve Israel's right to security control. Critics argue this dual approach is calculated. By appearing to embrace peace initiatives, Israel shields itself from international criticism, presenting Hamas as the intransigent party if they hesitate or reject. Simultaneously, the siege applies direct physical pressure on civilians and militants alike. It's a high-risk strategy. If Hamas capitulates, Israel claims victory. If Hamas rejects, Israel points to rejection as proof of terrorist intent. Either way, the siege maintains momentum, pushing Gaza closer to humanitarian collapse. This balancing act illustrates Israel's long-term approach: combine military dominance with diplomatic narratives, ensuring any peace terms reflect Israeli priorities more than Palestinian rights. But beneath the politics and strategies, it's civilians who pay the price, families caught in the crossfire, struggling against famine and displacement.
The siege is not only about rockets and politics, it is about hunger, thirst, and survival. Aid agencies report that Gaza's food supplies are nearing exhaustion, hospitals lack electricity, fuel deliveries are blocked. The United Nations warns of famine conditions, with over 450 deaths from starvation already recorded. Evacuation orders complicate this further. Many families cannot leave. Some have elderly members unable to travel, others lack funds or transport. Those who remain risk being branded militants, creating a cruel paradox: either leave and face displacement, or stay and risk being targeted. Humanitarian organizations face their own limits. The International Committee of the Red Cross has withdrawn from parts of Gaza City, citing security risks. Aid convoys struggle to enter, caught between military blockades and shelling. This is the most devastating effect of siege warfare, breaking not just armies but entire populations. As Gaza suffers, the region watches closely, because in Middle Eastern politics, no crisis exists in isolation. Every move sends ripples through allies and rivals alike. The Trump plan has divided the Arab world. Gulf states like Qatar and Egypt are pressing Hamas to at least consider it, framing acceptance as a chance to pause destruction. Yet other factions, including some Palestinian political groups, have denounced the proposal as one-sided and tailored to Israel's interests. The Gulf Cooperation Council officially announced that Arab peacekeeping forces cannot be deployed in Gaza under current circumstances, citing logistical and political barriers. This reveals the hesitancy of Arab governments to take direct responsibility for enforcing any agreement. Meanwhile, regional commentators highlight Netanyahu's success in shaping the plan to Israel's benefit. By aligning with Trump, Israel secures leverage, while Hamas is left struggling to justify rejection. In the streets, however, Arab public opinion is skeptical. Demonstrations across Amman, Cairo, and Beirut denounced the siege as collective punishment, warning leaders not to abandon Palestinians to a flawed framework. But while governments maneuver and civilians suffer, the true tipping point lies in one decision: whether Hamas signs or rejects the plan. If Hamas accepts the Trump plan, Gaza changes instantly. Weapons are surrendered, hostages returned, and Hamas effectively dismantles its role as a governing force. Israel pauses the offensive but retains the right to intervene and oversee security. Gaza becomes disarmed and externally managed. If Hamas rejects, the alternative is dire. Israel escalates, citing Hamas's refusal as justification. The siege tightens further, bombardment increases. International diplomacy, while still critical, may tilt in Israel's favor, portraying Hamas as the spoiler. Either choice carries consequences. Acceptance means disempowerment. Rejection means devastation. In either scenario, Palestinians themselves, civilians with no control over high-level decisions, bear the heaviest weight. This is why analysts call it a no-win situation. Hamas must decide not between victory or defeat, but between two forms of loss, hoping one may prove survivable in the long term. And this brings us to the last fact: the legacy of this moment and why Gaza's choice now could shape Middle Eastern politics for decades.
This crossroads may define the conflict's trajectory for years. If Hamas accepts, Gaza enters a new era of external oversight, potentially ending armed resistance, but leaving open questions about governance, sovereignty, and statehood. If Hamas rejects, the war deepens, with Gaza enduring catastrophic losses and Israel entrenching its control further. For Israel, either outcome is beneficial, either a weakened Hamas or the justification for harsher military action. For Palestinians, the risk is existential, losing territory, authority, or lives without gaining sovereignty. More broadly, this episode illustrates how external peace plans, particularly when crafted by powerful allies of Israel, become instruments of leverage rather than balanced negotiation. Trump's proposal, regardless of intent, is perceived as heavily tilted toward Israeli priorities, reinforcing Palestinian fears of being sidelined. The outcome will not only impact Gaza, but will shape Arab alliances, U.S. credibility, and international perceptions of Israel's war strategy. This is more than a battle for territory. It's a struggle for legitimacy, survival, and the very definition of peace. This story is still unfolding. Gaza remains under siege. Israel continues its offensive. Hamas has not yet made a final decision. The Trump plan hangs in the balance, its implications massive for everyone involved. So here's the takeaway. This is not simply about war or peace. It is about how power is used, whether through bombs, blockades, or peace frameworks that demand surrender. It is about civilians caught between strategies, their lives reduced to bargaining chips. And it is about what kind of future, if any, can emerge from a deal made under siege. If you value sharp, fact-driven breakdowns of global crises, make sure to subscribe to Global Pulse News. Share this video to keep the conversation alive, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Should Hamas accept an imperfect peace to save lives now, or reject it and risk even greater destruction? Because in moments like this, information isn't just knowledge, it's survival.